Man's greatest threats are that which he can't see. Time, disease, the machinations of others, these are all far deadlier than monsters or weapons. And these are the main opponents facing you in the world of Pathologic 2, a remake of Icepick Lodge's Eurojank masterpiece, and very quietly one of the most fascinating games of last generation. The game opens with one of the strangest tutorials I've ever seen. To start, you'll need to navigate through a vision of hell, showing you exactly what's going to happen if you don't succeed. It doesn't tell you what you need to succeed in, just that if you fail, everything will go wrong and a lot of people will die. From there, you awaken a train car as your friendly neighborhood coffin man falls out, and over the course of a few dreams or hallucinations, you're introduced to the game's mechanics, such as performing surgery, trading with the locals, and the game's really terrible combat. We'll get to that in a minute.
Come here.
Finally, the train stops and you're thrown into the game proper. It's a weird opening that perfectly sets the tone for the strangeness that awaits you within.
Please welcome the actor, Artemi Burach. Let us examine him.
You are Artemi Burach, and you're home. Your father, Isidore, has summoned you here with cryptic scrawling speaking of great horror. Upon your arrival, you learn that Isidore has been murdered, and you've been blamed. Also, there's an apocalyptic plague known as the Sand Pest, and it's breaking out, and now you're one of the town's only doctors that can stop it. On top of that, the major families that control the town are caught up in a feud, and on top of that, the children of the town keep disappearing into a strange, gravity-defying structure on the edge of town. Murder, disease, and politics are all constantly butting heads around you. As the game kicks off, you're given 3 main objectives to complete over the 12 days the town is left to live before the plague completely wipes out the population. First and most importantly is saving the lives of the town's most important characters. Being a doctor means visiting people around the town and administering medicine in an attempt to boost their immunities or offering cures should they get infected. These people can die, which gives you a worse ending with each failure, and given how well written most of these characters are, you're very well incentivized to make sure they live. Entire quest lines can stop cold if you let anyone die. Your second task is solving the murder of your father. Isidore was a prominent member of the town, well liked and respected, and in order to find out who killed him, you'll need to talk to the various townsfolk. This will usually lead to the nearly endless list of side quests, and it's impossible to complete all of them in a single run. Thankfully, you can track every lead and quest with the mind map, a wholly unique take on the quest log. Every scrap of information you gather is mapped here, with links between them showing correlation or where you might be missing something. Important leads can even be tracked while walking around by making Artemi focus, showing all areas of interest. While the politics of the game might be difficult to navigate at times, the actual game world is anything but. Finally, there's the plague to solve. Artemi is a doctor by training, but a surgeon by birthright. His father taught him the ways of the steppe people's medicine, including what organs to remove and what herbs to combine and how to make various tinctures. Science and experimentation play a large role in Pathologic 2, and a good deal of your time will be spent on finding the cure. This starts to play on Artemi's mind as the game goes on, and you'll sometimes find yourself conversing with the sand pest itself, or having strange dreams about your friends succumbing to the plague. It's all presented in a very Eastern European manner, never directly scary but always off-putting. To call Pathologic 2 a survival horror game doesn't do it justice. It's a game about survival that horrifies you as you play it. What I mean by that is that the terrifying elements are far more existential than Resident Evil or Silent Hill. There's the fear of survival as you scavenge for food, water, and medicine to keep yourself alive, which just gets harder and harder with each passing day. There's the terror of battling against time and the plague, with the game giving you gut-wrenching stats every day on the number of deaths. And there's the brutality of the game's fatalism, the dawning realization that you might not be able to save everyone. In this way, Pathologic 2 is a far scarier game than most I've ever played, and during my first run I actually had to take a break as it just became too much to bear at one point. It's also a brutally difficult game, and it's kind of meant to be. I'm not going to talk too much about how game reviewers totally failed this game, or how despite being the exact title so many writers have begged for time and time again, it got no traction whatsoever. Or how the developers had to add a difficulty options menu in a desperate bid to get any positive media attention, then begged people not to use these same difficulty options because they mess with the intention of the game. That aside, this is an insanely challenging game at times.
How should I act then?
Here's some advice. Actually, the only advice that matters. Try not to die.
Resources become very scarce very fast, with food and water becoming the hardest to come by, especially by the game's end when the plague has completely ripped through town. Much of your downtime, such as it is with the list of things to do, will be spent either scavenging the town or trading with the locals. Random trash is the most useful thing in this game. Empty bottles, toys, and mechanical parts can be bartered for food or medicine, or be used to repair wells and equipment that you have. Children become walking pharmacies and armories, happily trading away bullets and medicine for marbles and candies. And random townsfolk will be more than willing to trade for food or tools, provided they don't catch you breaking the law. Okay, I gotta talk about the combat for a quick second. It's really, really bad. It's weird, it's clunky, and it's just not very engaging. Whether this was done on purpose as a way to disincentivize fighting, I am not totally certain, but avoiding combat as much as possible is the best way to play. Fights are barely worth it anyway, as you often won't find much on the poor homeless bastard you just finished with a haymaker. Looting houses is far more profitable. You can find weapons, even a few guns, but these are rare, ammo is hard to come by, and they take up precious inventory space. To make things worse, they're unreliable and will break down over time. And death is actually punished in Pathologic 2, with permanent handicaps added to your stats for every failure. And don't think you can just save scum either. The game will add these handicaps the second you hit the ground. The game's presentation does much to help the overwhelming feeling that something is wrong. This is an extremely autumn feeling game, with the color palette of browns and oranges constantly beating you down with the hammer of early 1900s European depression. The town is a character in itself, defying time and place and only ever offering scant hints as to what it really is. There's the recognizable European architecture, sure, but then there's also the pervasive steppe culture on the fringes, just there enough to make things weird. And then there's the absolutely alien, things like the massive slaughterhouses that dominate the edge of town, or the previously mentioned gravity-defying shard just floating beyond the town's cathedral. To add to the weirdness is the little ways the game twists and turns within its own reality. Mask-wearing stage extras appear from time to time to offer insights into the town and its inhabitants, or to direct you during the game's most intense moments. Bird-faced orderlies, strangely reminiscent of the ancient plague doctors of the Black Death, confront you about the plague, occasionally seeming to appear from nowhere and acting as a mouthpiece for Artemis' internal monologue. The steppe people that live in town offer stark contrasts with the more regular citizenry, and it's not uncommon to see them performing strange rituals just out of sight. As things degrade, so too does the town around you. The vision of hell the game opens with becomes more and more a reality as the plague gets worse. Infected zones are nightmares, with constant flies buzzing, walking mummified plague victims, and visible clouds of disease slamming into people, all illuminated by corpse pyres and burning buildings. Even areas where the plague has passed through bear the scars as clouds of soot block the sun and bandits stalk the street. There are a few nice things in Pathologic 2, and the game is constantly ready and willing to rip them away from you at a moment's notice. Rounding out the presentation is the excellent audio work. The music is the obvious centerpiece here, a strange but fitting mix of electronica and tribal sounds that mimic the game's blending of colonial and tribal aesthetics, a reflection of Artemis himself. It's a soundtrack that does a wonderful job of setting the mood, from uncomfortable conversations with old friends to the off-putting nature of the town itself, or the growing nightmare of the plague. The sound work in general is fine, the scant little voice acting is decent enough, and the ambience of the world can draw you in, but the music is the real star of the show. Now, As much as I love this game, it is far from perfect. Despite a year of patches, the game just doesn't run very well, especially with a lot of stuff on screen. It struggled to stay over 40 FPS on a decent rig, and I've not read great things about the console versions either. The voice acting for random background NPCs is laughably bad, and they always repeat the same few lines over and over again. And there's just a load of bugs, usually with the AI. There's a stealth system that either barely works or is way too powerful. Characters get stuck on the world geometry all the time, and watching the AI battle each other is really awkward. Now, none of this ever totally tracks from the game, and I've never run into any game-breaking bugs, but considering how engrossing the game is at its best, when something pulls you out of that immersion, it hits like a jackhammer. Pathologic 2 is a game unlike any other, and it defies easy explanation. It's not a survival horror game, it's certainly not a walking sim, it's not a visual novel or puzzle game either. It's a weird combination of all of these things, and yet it rises above these definitions too. It's an infectious game if you let it be, and it'll easily dig its claws into you until it's through with you, compelling you onward even through the brutal challenge at times. It rewards persistence with some of the most interesting writing gaming has offered up, with genuine mystery and twists and turns for hours. At times it's a game I struggle to recommend, but if any of the footage behind this or what I've said even remotely interests you, then I implore you to pick it up. I'm becoming convinced this is one of the best games of last generation, and it is a true gem that should not be slept on.
Enough with this ridiculous meeting, you bunch of quacks. No type of medicine will help you here.